Lord of the Flies, a book that has inspired generations of storytellers and has influenced a countless number of our favorite books, TV shows, and even some music. Written in 1954, it was William Golding's first novel. He wrote it because he told his wife one day, wouldn't it be a good idea to write a story about some boys on an island, showing how they really behave, being boys and not little saints as they usually are in children's books? His wife said, that's a first-class idea, and told him to write it, so he did. Netflix has recently released a TV show adaptation of Lord of the Flies. I saw it advertised on there one day and wondered if it was any good and maybe I should make a video about it, so here we are. As I've said in other videos, there's no such thing as a perfect book-to-screen adaptation. To me, the most important thing is that an adaptation maintains the same tone and messaging as the source material, as well as following the basic plot beats of the novel, which seems like an obvious requirement, but we know from past experience isn't always the case. So there's no such thing as a perfect book-to-screen adaptation, but this one was pretty darn close. I'm going to be completely honest when I say this show was fantastic. It's definitely one of the best book-to-screen adaptations I've ever seen. It's also getting some leeway for me because William Golding himself said, the only interpretation of the story, if you want one, is your own. The only thing that matters is first the experience of being in the story, moving through it, then any interpretation you like. If it's yours, then that's the right one. Because what's in a book is not what the author put into it, it's what the reader gets out of it. However, that does not mean that I don't have any critiques for the show in terms of being an adaptation, because that's what you're here to watch, right? Lord of the Flies follows a group of young boys stranded on a deserted island after a plane crash. It's supposed to take place in the early 50s during a war, not World War II, but a new one. The plane was full of young boys fleeing the UK, presumably going somewhere safe. When the plane crashes, all of the adults on the plane die, leaving the boys to fend for themselves on this island. At its core, Lord of the Flies is about society and what happens when there are no rules. Who are we really when law and order goes out the window? The four main characters of this book are Ralph, Piggy, Simon, and Jack. Ralph is the first character we're introduced to, and he is the civilized one. He immediately wants to delegate tasks, start a signal fire so they can be rescued, etc., etc. He is the protagonist of the novel and is elected chief by the group. Piggy is the rational, logical one who follows Ralph around. He's always whispering in Ralph's ear about what the group should do next, and he and Ralph share the same desire for order and rules on the island. Simon is a shy boy and one of the only characters in the book who has a natural goodness to him. Unlike Ralph and Piggy, who believe structure and order are important because that's just what people do, that's how civilization works, Simon is naturally good. He's very intuitive, and he's kind for the sake of being kind, not just because that's what society expects. Jack is the novel's antagonist and immediately butts heads with Ralph. Jack believes he should be chief because he's head boy and he can sing a C sharp, which apparently is a selling point for someone's leadership abilities.
I can be chief. I'm chapter chorister and head boy. I can sing high C sharp.
When he loses out on the vote of chief, he decides that he will be the leader of the hunters consisting of the boys in his choir. Jack represents the instinctual savagery in humans and takes advantage of being on an island without adults, giving in to his cruel nature. There are other important side characters, but these are the four main ones in the book and the show. Each episode focuses on a different character. Episode 1 is about Piggy, episode 2 is about Jack, episode 3 is about Simon, and episode 4 is about Ralph. The show maintained the same story beats with a few exceptions, and those changes are mainly what I want to talk about, as well as minor character details. What stood out to me the most was that Ralph is too nice to Piggy. Part of Piggy's character is that he so desperately wants to be liked by Ralph and the others. In the show, Ralph tells him it would be an honor to teach him how to swim, whereas in the book, he barely listens to what Piggy has to say at the beginning and even tells him to shut up. Since we're on the topic of Piggy, let's discuss the elephant in the room. He has an actual name in the show. For context, if you're unfamiliar with the novel, Piggy is not this boy's real name. Obviously, that would be terrible. Piggy is a rude nickname that kids at his school gave him because of his appearance. During his first meeting with Ralph, Piggy makes sure to ask for his name straight away, but Ralph doesn't ask for Piggy's name. Then a bit later, Piggy says that they should learn the names of all the other boys on the island when they find them and make a list. He says this so Ralph will take the hint and ask him for his name. Ralph doesn't, so Piggy says, I don't care what they call me so long as they don't call me what they used to call me at school. Ralph takes the bait here and asks what they used to call him, and Piggy tells him. He begs Ralph not to tell the others, but of course Ralph does, and Piggy is referred to only as Piggy for the entire book.
Shut up, fatty. He's not a fatty. His real name's Piggy.
Bruh.
We never learn his true name, and Piggy's identity is stripped from him immediately because of this. What makes it worse is that Piggy makes sure to learn and remember everyone else's names, but no one ever bothers to learn his name. They never show him that small amount of respect. This poor kid is forever branded as something he hates, the others calling him a name to purposefully single him out and remind him of his status as an outsider. Despite being the most level-headed and logical of the group, he's ridiculed for his appearance and not taken seriously. He's Piggy, not Nicholas, which is the name the show gives him. He took the time to learn everyone else's names, but no one cared enough to learn his. That's his tragic story. In the show, Piggy shares his name with Ralph, which is Nicholas or Nicky, and Ralph refers to him solely as Nicky for the rest of the show. My only explanation for this change is that they wanted to make Ralph more redeemable and really make it clear that he's the hero of the story. In the book, he's just as rude and dismissive of Piggy as the rest of the boys, only realizing what a true friend Piggy was until after Piggy has died. The book shows that even golden, fair boys like Ralph have their faults. I'm sure the writers also wanted to humanize Piggy more and not use the stupid derogatory nickname, which I appreciate. That's why I really wanted to learn his name in the book, but at the same time, that's the point, to show how these boys instantly assign roles to each other, and Piggy was the outcast that they never treated like one of their own. As I said, it's not until Piggy dies until Ralph realizes he was the only true friend he had. By using his name throughout the show, it sort of lessens the impact of that realization. Ralph is not kind and patient with Piggy in the book. He thinks he's clingy and annoying. Piggy is desperate for Ralph's approval. It's not until Piggy is gone that Ralph wakes up, so to speak, and understands how he treated him and that Piggy was a true friend. Piggy's death represents the last bit of order and civilization leaving the island, and Ralph understands that. Ralph wept for the end of innocence, the darkness of man's heart, and the fall through the air of the true wise friend called Piggy. Piggy's death in the show is different from the book, but still terrible and carries the same impact. For context, during the climax of the book, Piggy and Ralph go to the antagonist, Jack's camp, to retrieve Piggy's glasses that Jack and his hunters stole. They stole the glasses because they discovered early on that they could use them to start a fire. Jack and his hunters were without fire, so they invaded Ralph and Piggy's shelter to steal Piggy's glasses. When Ralph and Piggy confront Jack, one of Jack's followers, Roger, throws a rock at Piggy, which causes him to fall off the mountain they're on and land on a rock in the sea 40 feet below, killing him almost instantly. In the show, they still confront Jack and the hunters, and Roger still throws the rock at Piggy, except Piggy doesn't fall off the cliff. His death is instead drawn out with Ralph dragging him to safety and the two of them hiding from the hunters. I feel like it's worse in the show because it's so drawn out, and I think I might actually prefer Piggy's death in the show versus the book. The last scene between him and Ralph was so sweet, and it does add that emotional impact that was missing by the writers giving Piggy a name. We are able to see through this scene just how true their friendship was. While I did enjoy the friendship between Ralph and Piggy in the show, I do think it was important to show that Ralph was just as susceptible to manipulation by the antagonist, by in turn antagonizing Piggy, if that makes any sense. So that was Piggy. Let's follow the same order of the episodes and discuss Jack.
A test needs to be passed. We need to pass this one.
As I explained previously, Jack Merridew is the main antagonist of the novel. He immediately butts heads with Ralph, and Piggy is intimidated by Jack and his uniform superiority and the offhand authority in Merridew's voice. Even the way he's first introduced, before he even speaks, lets the reader know right away what type of character Jack will be and the energy he's bringing to the story. Within the diamond haze of the beach, something dark was fumbling along. Then the creatures stepped from mirage onto clear sand, and they saw that the darkness was not all shadow, but mostly clothing. The creature was a party of boys, marching approximately in step in two parallel lines and dressed in strangely eccentric clothing. Each boy wore a square black cap with a silver badge on it. Their bodies, from throat to ankle, were hidden by black cloaks. The boy who controlled them was dressed in the same way, though his cap badge was golden. Inside the floating cloak, he, Jack, was tall, thin, and bony, and his hair was red beneath the black cap. His face was crumpled and freckled and ugly without silliness. Out of this face stared two light blue eyes, frustrated now and turning, or ready to turn, to anger. Obviously, his physical appearance is different in the show, but another thing I always like to say when it comes to adaptations is it doesn't matter if an actor looks exactly like the character in the book, if physical appearance isn't important to the story. What matters is if they embody the character and truly bring them to life. And wow, did this young actor do that. Jack was one of the strongest characters in the show for me, mainly because they gave him scenes that weren't in the book, scenes that expanded on his character and some of the lore. In episode 2, we get some flashback sequences, one of them showing Jack and his absent parents. I don't remember him having daddy issues in the book, but I like that the show expanded on it. In the book, Jack can seem one-dimensional at times. I don't like this perception that he's inherently evil and deserves a bunch of hate. Yes, he took things way too far with the freedom of being on a deserted island without any adults, but he's still a kid just trying to survive. There's usually always is a reason for the type of behavior Jack exhibits, so I like that the show humanized him in some ways. This actually leads me to a gripe about the version of the book that I read, which was this one by Penguin. There's a section in the back with a list of media for further exploration if you liked Lord of the Flies, and tell me why most of them are about psychopaths and the inner workings of psychopaths' minds. Is Jack a psychopath? Are we forgetting he's still just a kid? Yes, kids can have that disorder. Yes, he took things too far, but I think writing his character off as just a psychopath erases the nuance of how his character devolved the way he did. We all have a beast inside of us. For some of us, that beast just comes out stronger and more violently. To add to that, the show adds moments of vulnerability to his character that I enjoyed. For example, there's a scene where he's climbing a cliff to get a piece of debris. He's visibly distressed about being up so high, and it's a reminder that mean and temperamental as he is, he's still just a kid. I'll let you guys discuss whether or not Jack deserved moments like these, and if it's wrong to make him someone to empathize with at times. He was one of the stronger characters in the show in terms of acting, which could be why they decided to give him these scenes, because they knew the actor could pull it off. A character you can easily empathize with, though, is Simon.
This isn't a test. We don't need to prove anything. We don't need to be brave. We don't need to be scared.
Episode 3 focuses on Simon, a character I wanted more from in the book. When I was reading it, it felt like Simon just sort of tagged along with Jack and later Ralph. Our first introduction to him is when he passes out and Jack says he's always throwing a feint, and then the choir boys are all laughing about it. Simon is sensitive and empathetic with an intimate understanding of the island. He's one of the first characters to realize something is off, but he's never able to fully articulate what exactly is wrong. It isn't until he says the famous line that the reader and Simon understands. Maybe, he said hesitantly, maybe there is a beast. What I mean is, maybe it's only us. In the book, the boys think there is a beast on the island. The littluns, aka the little boys, swear they've seen a beast, that it comes from the water and hangs from the trees. They even have nightmares about it, leading Simon to believe the island is a bad island. Later, Simon discovers the body of a parachutist and believes it to be the beast. The body is strung up among the trees, so when the wind blows, his head lifts up and down, and making it seem like he's animated. Simon runs down to tell the others about the beast, but ends up being mistaken for it, the other boys brutally killing him while in a frenzy. The show did a great job at letting Simon's characteristics shine. He's quirky and quiet, and I really like the way that they portrayed him. Like with Jack's episode, there are flashbacks in this one, mostly between Simon and Jack at school. In the show, Jack and his hunters find lost luggage from the plane, and they discover Simon's suitcase. Inside is a diary. Jack snaps at the hunters for wanting to read it, taking it away from them, only to keep it and read it for himself. Through these diary entries, we find that Simon and Jack carried on a secret friendship during a winter break. When all the other boys from their school went home, Simon and Jack were the only ones left. They developed a bond, but when school started again, Jack pretended that Simon didn't exist anymore.
January 4th. Lent term begins tomorrow, so slowly children will return to where they should be. Jack was kind at breakfast, but by lunch he was readying himself for the arrival of the others. I asked him to meet me at the Tree of Destiny, and he said he did not know which tree I talked of. I tried to show little response. Morris was the first of his platoon to appear. He had cake from his cook, which the two shared whilst talking loudly of the adventures of Morris's Christmas. I sat close enough to listen, and then returned to the dorm alone.
What I loved most about Simon's episode was the imagery. The episode starts with a flashback sequence where he's drawn to a depiction of Christ's crucifixion. In the book, the dead man with the parachute is caught in a way that is similar to a crucified position, so I like that they added this scene of him looking at a depiction of it, possibly foreshadowing what Simon will find later. Then, at the end of Simon's episode, he's lying prone in the sea as the current takes him away. And how is he lying? In a similar crucified pose. A final reminder of who Simon was in relation to the story and the other characters. He was the moral compass, the innately good character, who knew something was off with the island. He tried to tell others about the beast, or the path they were heading down eternally, and paid for it with his life. Simon didn't die for their sins, but because of them. And perhaps his death was a sacrifice to the Lord of the Flies, aka the severed boar's head the boys stuck on a stick as an offering to the beast. Simon hallucinates a conversation with the Lord of the Flies, where it tells him,
"You are a silly little boy, just an ignorant, silly little boy."
Fancy thinking the beast was something you could hunt and kill. You knew, didn't you? I'm part of you. Close, close, close. There's nothing more to say other than Simon deserved better, and I can't decide if I like his episode or Jack's episode the best, which leads me to the final episode and the final main character, Ralph.
Yes, I'd like to be chief.
Out of the few gripes I had with the show, Ralph's character is one of them. I mentioned previously that he was too nice to Piggy, and I think the writers did that to make Ralph more redeemable and more of a character that you want to root for. Because let's be honest, if he was super rude to Piggy the whole time, I don't know if audiences would be able to understand the nuance of his character and like sympathize with him still. In the book, Ralph is not perfect. He's impatient with Piggy, he wants to be leader but often lacks the authority to be one, and he participates in the frenzied murder of Simon. Ralph represents what's right, not necessarily what is good. That being said, the show puts him on a high pedestal. While he does tell the group Piggy's nickname, that's probably one of the only flaws his character exhibits. He's consistently kind to Piggy, he's firm about the rules, and he doesn't participate in the murder of Simon. In the show, while Simon's being killed, Ralph and Piggy run off. Probably the writers' attempt to make sure the audience knows they're the good guys, when the point of the book is to show that even good people can do bad things, especially when reduced to our basest natures. They still struggle with the guilt, like they do in the book, showing how much Simon's death affected them in comparison to Jack, who couldn't care less. However, they struggle with the mere act of it, not because they participated in it. Ralph's participation in Simon's murder is to show that even people who value rules and what's right can be manipulated by those in power and swept up into a herd-like mentality. I do appreciate that the writers went all in though with making Ralph the good guy, and overall I don't think it changed the messaging of the story too much, and the ending with him talking to the sailor had the same impact as the book. The way he delivered that final line, "We were together then."
I would have thought you could put on a better show than that. I mean,
It was like that at first. We were together then.
Getting chills thinking about it. Every time I think about it, I'm like, oh, so good. Also, props to the guy who played the sailor, because his shift when he realized the boys weren't just playing at war, but were actually at war, was so good. I know I'm not completely tearing into this adaptation like I've done in the past, but I promise I do have other critiques. It's just hard to come up with many when the story beats all manage to stay the same and the characters were fleshed out and represented accurately. I do like to take note of anything that messes with the themes of the story and the progression of any character arcs, so most of the critiques I'm about to discuss revolve around that. One thing that threw me was the boys find a dead body almost right away. After they all convene on the beach, they decide to explore the island and make sure they're really stranded. In the book, they traverse up to the top and realize, yep, it's an island, and come back down. In this show, their journey up is halted when they come across a dead body. At first, I thought this was meant to be the parachutist that a few of the characters mistake for the beast, but as the scene went on, I realized this was an addition that the writers of the show included of their own accord. Jack, Ralph, Simon, and Piggy stumble upon the pilot of the plane's dead body. We glimpse Jack's true nature here when he shows contempt for the pilot, saying a better man would have flown the plane better and not have made such a mistake like crashing. The boys want to bury the pilot, but Jack refuses to because he doesn't think the pilot deserves it. Then they want to take the pilot's body down to the ocean, but it's too heavy, so they just shove him off a cliff. And this is mainly Jack's doing. And the pilot doesn't make it into the ocean, okay? He lands in some trees down below. The others are kind of mortified by it, but Jack is just like, oh well. And to me, that was definitely showing his cavalier attitude towards death. In my opinion, Jack's switch from typical bully to cruel psychopath is more sudden in the book. One significant scene being when he couldn't catch the pig the first time and he stabs his knife into a tree thinking next time he will get it and there will be no mercy. However, they do include the scene where Jack hesitates to kill the pig, but he starts blaming Piggy instead of accepting that he couldn't bring himself to kill the animal. In the context of the other scene, it does add some depth, how when faced with someone already dead, Jack is able to be uncaring, but when he's put in the position where he has to administer the death, he hesitates. They knew very well why he hadn't killed the pig, because of the enormity of the knife sending and cutting into living flesh, because of the unbearable blood. That hesitation doesn't last throughout the story though, because once he gets the proverbial taste for blood, he has no qualms about killing. Also in the book, Piggy doesn't provoke Jack like he does in the show. Instead, it's Ralph asking Jack why he didn't kill the pig and Jack snapping at Ralph instead. My only explanation for these scenes where Piggy antagonizes Jack is that they needed to create obvious tension between the two, other than relying on Jack's general attitude of distaste towards Piggy. Another change from the book that I didn't love happens in the first episode. At the beginning of the book, the Litlands talk about a snake thing and that it was a beastie. We never see this beast, if there even is a beast. Later we learn that they believe the dead body of the parachutist is the beast, but really the beast was themselves the whole time. However, in the show, two little boys are at the lagoon and Roger, one of Jack's lackeys, starts throwing rocks in the water out of sight to scare them. This is supposed to be the beastie, I guess. While it is pretty heavy-handed with the maybe we're the beast theme. I do think it gives away the theme too early. For part of the book, you're wondering what the beast is, just like the boys, or if it even exists. Then as the tone darkens, we learn that yes, the boys are the beasts, just like Simon wondered. So I don't know if I like this added scene. Let me know your thoughts. I feel like if you hadn't read the book and you were watching the show, you wouldn't know what would happen next, and not necessarily in a good way. I guess this is sort of how the book is too. I try not to be too critical of classic novels because writing styles have changed so much over the years. Still, it is hard to see the linear goals and progression in the book, and that carries over into the show. The book is more character driven since we watch these boys give in more and more to the beasts inside them. However, there are no clear what will happen next moments. You're just along for the ride without much of an idea where it's going to take you, which is a double-edged sword when it comes to storytelling. Now onto a list of things I liked about this adaptation. Originally at critique, I was upset that Piggy was the only main character not to get a flashback sequence. Thinking back, I do think it was an intentional choice to further show how he was stripped of his identity. But if you're gonna do that, then why go to the trouble of giving him a name? Granted, no one besides Ralph in the audience learns his real name, but I do think it lessened the effect of Piggy's overall character arc, which is that he's been discarded and disrespected. Okay, that was half praise, half critique. Now onto the real list of what I liked about the show. The score felt very 50s, 60s, very fitting for the time period, and I liked how it shifted to be darker in tone, just like the story. I also think the show did a better job of showing the fire than the book did. The book was kind of like, yep, a big fire broke out and we can't find one of the little kids, so he probably died in it. It was hard for me to picture the scope of the fire in my head while reading. And if you're watching this thinking, what fire? Maybe you haven't read the book or you don't remember, but when the boys first attempt to make a signal fire at the top of the mountain, they use a bunch of dry, rotted wood and basically burn down a portion of the forest on accident. There was an in-depth conversation between Jack and Simon where they discussed being rescued, and I thought that was a good addition as well. I feel like in the book they don't discuss that much, again overlooking the fact that these are boys missing their families and hoping their parents will come for them. I'm not here to discredit what William Golding wrote. He was one of the first people to write about the let's throw a bunch of people into a world without rules and see what happens trope. Honestly, without Lord of the Flies, we probably wouldn't have media like Lost, Survivor, The Walking Dead, and so much more. I think there was so much that could have been explored further in the novel, and I like that the show did just that. It's what I hoped while reading, that the show would explore these characters more, and they did. For example, Ralph was always talking about his dad, so it was really nice to actually see it and see their relationship. The imagery is also stunning and definitely brought the story to life. I really liked the scenes at night in the lagoon with the red trees. I don't know what kind of trees they are or if they even exist, but I don't care. It looked cool. The casting was chef's kiss. All the young actors did such a great job, and it's hard to judge a child actor, but these kids understood the assignments for sure. The first episode has shots of each individual boy staring up at the camera. At first I thought this was an interesting stylistic choice, but during the final episode we're shown these shots again, only with the boys as they are at the end, completely changed. And I'm sorry, but the pig hunting scene blended with the plane crash scene from Jack's perspective was magnificent and might cement his episode as my favorite. I really can't choose when I enjoyed all of them, especially his and Simon's episodes. And I would be remiss to exclude the scene during Ralph's episode where he buries Piggy. The fact that Ralph took the time to bury Piggy, circling back to the first episode when they were discussing burying the pilot, got me in my feels. This also comes back to my point about how I don't mind that Piggy's death was changed in the show, it still carries the same impact. Having Ralph bury Piggy shows what the book tells us, that Ralph considered Piggy a true friend in the end. Overall, I enjoyed the book and the show. I love these types of stories where the characters are thrust into a new world or an isolated setting and have to survive and form a new world order. They also have to decide whether to give in to the only the strong survive mentality or maintain their morals with the hope that things will return to how they once were. It's these type of stories that make us question ourselves and think about what we would do in those situations. If I had to rate this show as an adaptation, I would give it a 4.25 out of 5 stars. And if I had to rate it as a standalone piece of media, I would give it a 4 out of 5 stars. I thought the show was fantastic, and even days later I'm still thinking about it. The creative liberties enhanced the original messaging, which William Golding himself said was up to the reader to interpret in the first place. The acting was fantastic, the makeup, the costumes, the location, it was great. I saw that it doesn't have a stellar rating on IMDb. I didn't read any reviews though because I didn't want to muddle my own opinions. There's also a behind the scenes documentary that I contemplated watching just to see if the director explained their interpretation of the story, but again, I didn't want anything to muddle my view of it. It has been nominated for 2 Emmys, Outstanding Sound Editing and Mixing, and I think those are well deserved. Maybe I'm in the minority for liking this adaptation. I haven't seen much online about it, and it definitely didn't cause as many waves as other adaptations that have been released. Let me know if you've seen the show and what you thought about it. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more classic novel adaptation analyses, and let me know what I should read and watch next. See you next time. Bye.